Hello, good afternoon and welcome to New Forest Morse. It's basically I thought today what we could do is cover some interesting topic, which the topic is going to be troubleshooting any feeding issues. And I've been doing this now for a couple of years, and in my first year I had a snake that gave me a lot of grief. It just wouldn't eat, and ball pythons are normally quite good feeders, but there's always one or two that can be problematic, and I'm sure anyone out there with a small, medium or large collection will realise that there are some issues that can be concerning, and sometimes as new breeders particularly we can be over concerned about some of the feeding issues because we want our snakes to feed either weekly or every 2 weeks, and if they decide not to feed we get concerned and worried, thinking that how long can they survive without actually taking any food. And obviously it depends on the condition of the snake, it depends on the age of the snake, and it depends on so many other factors, which we're going to cover a few of those today. But today I'm glad that Adam's joining me today, so thank you, Adam, for being our cameraman.
That's all right.
You're probably going to learn an awful lot about feeding snakes, Adam. So be interesting if you want to put any input or any thoughts in, Adam, do feel free to interject any questions or ideas. Quite good to get your perspective if you feel prompted to do so. So I think what I'll do is I'll introduce you to the first problem snake I've had, who's no longer a problem. But his name is Ezra. He was sold to us as a girl, and so I was trying to build this adult female up to try and get her ready for breeding because I wanted to produce some eggs in my first year. And I was scratching my head because it just wouldn't eat. And I spoke to the previous owner and asked them what the food they were eating, and she explained that they were eating a mixture of mice and rats. And it's a nice long fit snake. Come and have a look at it, because it turns out he's actually a male. His name is Ezra, and I'll show you where he is. So he's an Enchi male. So there's Ezra. He's quite a shy animal. He's quite long and thin, but if you look at his body over here, Adam, just over here, you'll see that he's just starting to put on weight. Now he'll fast for as long as 6 months. Can you believe that? Wow. And it really freaked me out. I tried so hard, I spent so much time trying to feed him. It turns out we found out he's a drop feeder, that the way you present the food to him is important, and we accidentally dropped the rat onto the mat and he came up and struck it. So it's funny because not only do you have to understand the size of the prey, the type of prey, but how to present to the animal, because each of them have their own unique, quirky ways of doing things. And so in my first year when I had Ezra, I was just scratching my head and really every time spending a lot of time trying to get it to feed and getting really worried. And in the end I called up a really experienced breeder, and he made a couple of suggestions to me, and he said, well, are you washing out all the flavour of the rat? Because a lot of people dip the rats in water to heat up the rat, so that when you present it to the snake has heat pits around its mouth, and it picks up the heat signature of a live animal out in the wild, and it follows that because most of the snakes are nocturnal when they feed at night, and they go out and they use their heat signature of the prey item to home in on it and ambush it, and they love to ambush. So a good tip to help with feeding is to feed at night if you're able to do so. Although Jared and I have experimented and we've got a facility with very few windows and blinds, and we fed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, had an amazing experience. And I'll go through some of our ideas that might help you troubleshoot any of your problems, because I'm getting 1 or 2 friends and new breeders who are getting into the hobby that are asking me questions, and I thought the best thing is to make a video to share my experience as quite a new breeder. And if anyone out there has got even more experience and they want to input in, please feel free, because I'm learning and I've still got some snakes that I'm troubleshooting myself, so I might need some help from the outside community. But there's an example where, now if I look at his reading record, and in fact I'll show you his reading record, this is number 51, and I'll just show you his feeding record. Because the other thing is, it's really important to keep a record each week of what's feeding, what isn't feeding. And today, after cleaning, I spent about half an hour going through the whole collection and looking and studying at patterns of who's feeding regularly, who's feeding every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every week, to get a feel and flavour of where the collection's going. Now we've got 140 snakes in the facility, which means I'm going to have quite a diversified portfolio of feeding issues, which is going to give me experience to know how to troubleshoot. And I think I'm getting there, but I'm still learning as well. So if we go to number 51 here, Adam, you can home in on that. Let me just get this up. So let's just get number 51. And there you'll see Enchi. Bought it from Debbie. That's the male. And we started recording on the computer from the 7th of September 2020, but obviously I had him a year earlier than that, which I've got a written record elsewhere. So there you can see we learnt on the 28th of September 2020 that he's a drop feeder. You see that? Mm-hmm. So we make notes as well to help us with each of these. So he shed out on that day, he refused, then he took a small rat, then he took a small rat, then he refused, then he shed, then he took a small rat. Now look at the refusals from the 26th of October 2020 all the way down. Ref is shortened for refused, still refusing, shedding, refusing, shedding, refuse, to the 15th of March 2021. Now if you count the number of months, Adam, so he went off food in October and he went back on food in March. So that tells me during the majority of the breeding season, boys often switch off because they want to breed, and he did want to come out and breed. I didn't put him to any female, but the thing here is that because I thought he was sold to him as a girl and he wasn't feeding, I got extra panicky about it. But then I realised that we didn't sex him properly. Jared showed me how to sex him. Sexed him, suddenly his hemipenes kicked out, and also I think we put a male in with him, and they were having a fight basically, and I thought this is not right. So this is interesting, is sexing the animal is a very important part of troubleshooting issues. Make sure you get the sex right, because male and females can feed differently depending on the breeding season and their condition and other things. So because we didn't identify him correctly in the first place, I was getting unduly worried. But males can go off food for 6 months during the breeding season, up to 6 months. And I know of a story where one of my friends had a snake that fasted for 18 months, but it was a big 3 kilogram snake, and it dropped down to 2 kilograms. It lost a kilogram in weight over 18 months, and eventually it fed, and that was the longest he's ever had. So these snakes are incredibly adaptable, and they can survive a long time depending on their condition and size. I'm not saying the same is true of a hatchling or of a subadult, because they're different, because they haven't put on the weight in the first place, so you would be very worried. You wouldn't want a subadult or a hatchling to go for too long, more than a few weeks or months. But if you've got a mature adult that's full of weight, and I have another one I'll show you called Queenie, which gave me an issue due to an importation problem when the people that brought them from Europe gave it to us in December in a cold bag, and the animal was cold and hasn't fed for 3 or 4 months, only 1 or 2 times, and I'll show you that one in a second. So you can see 6 months of going without food. Now if you look at what he's doing now, he went back on food on the 22nd of March 2021. Small rat, small rat, small rat. Then he refused 1 week. Small rat, small rat, small rat. Shed, refused. Small rat, small rat, small rat, small rat, small rat. So now he's on a big feeding every week, and he's nailing food without hesitation. Present it to him, smells it, bang, he's straight on it. So what was a worry for me is no longer a worry, and I know, having had him for 2 years, he's a feeder that is a seasonal feeder, and I haven't got to worry during the breeding season that he will switch off food and he'll live off his reserves, and then he'll kick back in when he's ready. So you have to follow the animal. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? And also, if you notice that he refused during the shed process, so when he's in shed he doesn't eat as well. And most snakes, you'll find, the majority of snakes will go off food when there's a shedding issue. So if your ball python's not feeding, if its eyes are going blue and it's starting to shed, don't panic, don't worry, because that's very normal. And the reason why they don't eat while they're going through shed is the shedding process is allowing for the growth of the animal. The reason why a snake sheds is often because, one of the reasons, is it wants a new skin to cover a growing body, to expand the body. So every 4 to 6 weeks you might find an animal shedding, depending on its feeding cycles and its growth cycles. Some could be quicker than that, some could be longer. So if you've got an animal that's in shed, that's one area that I wouldn't worry about if it's not feeding, because as soon as it's shed out and it's relaxed, it will feed probably the following week, as you can see here with this particular example. Now I'm going to show you an animal that shed out today, Queenie, a big 3 kilogram pastel clown I bought to help us with our clown projects. When she arrived, which was I think November, December last year, we felt her body heat and she was incredibly cold, so she wasn't being looked after on the transportation. I'll show you what she's looking at now. She just shut out, but she's only had 2 or 3 meals in the last 6 months, 7 months, which would be concerning, but she started off at 3 kilograms, and I'm hoping she will actually start to pick up more feeding as her condition and her desire to eat improves. If they've got reserves, they often switch off if they've been upset during transportation or movement. And sometimes, don't worry if you've moved a snake and they take 2 or 3 weeks to get going, because they're getting reconditioned to their new environment, their new owners, their new substrate, their new home, and that can switch them off. So if you've got a snake that's moved recently, don't be too concerned if it does switch off its food. But you might want to troubleshoot and work out how to help that snake get back on food as soon as possible, as we're trying to do with Queenie. But have a look at Queenie. She's a big pastel girl. Now we use a black tag for anything that's either not eating or problem feeder, so that we can keep focused on them. Now she has shed out. Her shed wasn't perfect. Her body's okay, but you can see her shed has been a little bit so she's not shedding perfectly, but she's a substantial animal. You can see how big she is. She has shown an interest in food and she has eaten 2 or 3 times, but she's not a regular feeder at the moment. So what can we do to help her? Well, the key is not to disturb her too often. Never force food on an animal, particularly a mature adult like this, or any animal. They'll come and their instincts, they'll get into the S position, they'll take. She was showing an interest. I think that we experiment. We try multis, we try smaller prey items, maybe try a mouse, maybe mix the adjust temperatures, so look at the humidity. Now obviously the humidity isn't perfect for her because she's not shedding, so that could tell me that because her shed wasn't perfect this time, the reason she may not be eating is due to a humidity problem in her rub. So what could I do? Well, I've bought some extra bowls. So if an animal wants extra humidity, one of the solutions would be to put a second water bowl in there, or a larger water bowl. So let's just try that as a possible solution. Just give that a clean. I'm going to give her some extra water. Now it's the size of the water bowl determines the humidity in the rubs. Now we've got 55 to 60 degrees ambient humidity, or percent in the facility. In the rubs, you'll find there's going to be an extra 10 or 20% depending on the water you've got in there, and it's the surface area of the water, not the depth of the bowl, that gives you extra humidity. So we'll put this extra bowl in here, Adam, if you come with me. So this is one way of troubleshooting a problem. So she's got obviously a humidity problem, and if we put another bowl in there for her, so she's got a small bowl in at the moment. I'll leave both in there, and then we'll see, and we'll look at her in the next few weeks to see whether that will help her with her humidity, and also see whether her feeding instinct might increase. The other thing is extra structure in there. She might feel more comfortable, she might have been used to a big hide in her previous enclosure, so she hasn't got a hide. So I could introduce a really big hide, and I did try that, and I bought a really big hide for her as well to give her extra confidence. The only problem I found was that she was going on top of the hide and I couldn't open the drawer. So what she needs is a 70-litre rub. So the other solution is, and we've got some 70-litre rubs that we're going to be bringing into the facility. We'll move those bigger girls into a bigger enclosure, give them a bigger hide, even think about changing the substrate. If she's used to cocoa husk from the previous owner and we're giving her paper towels, she'll not be happy with that. So what you do is you go through and you change some of the substrate. You check the heat, you check the humidity, make sure it's clean in there, because another issue on feeding is, in the wild, I've been studying this, that wild animals are always moving in and out of different feeding areas, and they like to be feeding in a clean area where rodents can't smell their scent, so they can ambush correctly. So one of the mistakes we make is, if we don't clean a day or two prior to feeding day, because there's too much smell in the rub, they may switch off their feeding instincts because they're used to being in much cleaner environments in the wild, so that they can ambush more more efficiently because their scent isn't being picked up by the rodents. So there's another little tip that might be worth considering. And as we go through these animals, we'll let them teach us some tips of how we can improve our feeding instinct. So there's a couple. So I think we'll put the extra water bottle in there, see whether that improves. If it doesn't, we're going to be moving the 70 litre rubs into here and then put all the big girls in there. And then we might play around with substrate, we might play around with the size of their hides and give them as much. I think the key is if your snake is feeling confident and feeling loved, it's more likely to eat. So the more we can do to improve our treatment of the snake to enhance its life, it will reward us and it will thank us for that, and it'll probably more readily receive food from us as we build that relationship. But I'm not worried about her. She came in at 3 kilograms. She's now in the right temperature. She's now showing an interest in food. She is taking food occasionally. I'd like her to take food more often, but I'm not going to rush her. I'm going to go at her pace and let her make that adjustment. I think the thing that didn't help was when she came over from Europe, she got really, really cold, and we're talking very cold. And it's amazing that she's eaten since then, but she is definitely on the mend, and I think we're just going to have to keep an eye on her. And hopefully we'll get her back on food so that next year we can then focus on perhaps putting a male to her. But we won't do any breeding until I get her in excellent condition and make sure that she's feeding as regularly as she needs to feed to sustain the growth of the eggs. Okay, so there's a second example. Let's have a look at some other examples. Now we've got some females that have hit the 1,000 gram wall. Now you may have heard of this, but I've never experienced it very much, but now the collection is getting bigger. I've noticed that this season there's 2 or 3 girls that we've got that we were pounding food every week and building up body weight, and then during the breeding season, with all the other females starting to go off food because their follicles were big enough, they switch off. But some of the younger girls that were sub-adults that were getting into adult stage were probably picking up the rhythm of the room, and maybe there's a theory that they're practicing how to prepare for breeding, therefore they learn to switch off feeding at a certain size. And it might be they think they're very comfortable being at 1,000 grams, that they're going to have a resting period, and then as soon as October, November, December this year comes in, you might find they'll start pounding food and building, ready for preparing themselves for the breeding season next year. So I'll just show you a couple of those, and we've got one down here. Now this girl has got a ferocious appetite. Her name is Xena, and there she is. She's a clown, 100% het albino, and she came in at 250 grams about 9 months ago. She's now weighing 1,350 grams. She's just grown so fast, and that's just feeding her once a week, a small rat. And if I show you her now, she came out and showed an interest in food yesterday when I fed, but she refused. But if you look at the size of her, see how big she is, Adam? I mean, she will be potentially a female for next year because she's weighing about 1,350 grams. And she's a lovely example of a clown. I really do like her very much. And I've never seen a clown grow so quickly, because most of our pastel clowns eat small Maltese and they're very slow growers. This girl has had a tremendously good appetite, and we're so grateful because we're bringing on her husband, and I'll show you him in a minute. But isn't she just lovely? She's gorgeous, isn't she? So she's about 1,350. So she's she wants to just play and explore with us. But I'm not worried that she's gone off food for a few weeks, because I think she'll come back on as soon as the autumn comes. And maybe it's the hot weather that turns them off a little bit, I don't know. But this 1,000 gram wall is starting to affect us here. And there's 2 or 3 other animals, so I'm not worried about her. She's got plenty in reserve. I mean, she's only not even 18 months old, so I think that she's a wonderful animal and I'm not too concerned about her. Look, she's come and say hello to you, Adam. She's feeling the heat signature of the camera. So from her heat pads, you can see the heat pads are there, but she just loves to spend a bit of time with us. So we'll slip you back, but she does love a little bit of, and that's the other thing, is that maybe, and this is the danger that we can fall into, as your collection gets bigger, you have less time for each animal. And I think when you feed an animal, actually handling them can have a direct impact on their confidence levels and how they feel about us. And I think if you don't handle your snakes enough, they may not necessarily feed as well. If you overhandle them, they can switch off feed as well. So you've got to play every snake by ear. Some of them like to be handled and some of them don't. The ones that don't want to be handled, I think gently handle them occasionally, and then they're probably more likely to feed. But don't overhandle a snake to the point where maybe it switches off feeding, because that can be a danger as well. Oh, look, she's squeezing herself along me. Look, she's wanting to constrict me. There she goes. Right, Xena, we're going to put you back. So you're one of our very fast growing animals that have suddenly come to hit a wall, but we're not concerned about you at this stage, and I believe that she'll come back onto feeding very soon. But she might even be exploring and wanting to find a male. I mean, can you see how she's sniffing out the male racks and sniffing for males? And that's the other thing, is maybe she's thinking about breeding and she's looking for a partner. Maybe her follicles are starting to grow and she's looking to lock up. But I think we'd like to build her another 400 or 500 grams before we get there. Right, Xena, we're gonna she's loving her exercise. We'll let you get back into there. There we go. And so that's one example of an animal that's gone off feeding recently, but not to worry about that one. So let's just see what other examples we can share. Now let's talk about males. Now over here we've got Titus, who's still in the breeding rotation. He's in shed and he's gone off food. He hasn't fed for several weeks, but he's in shed at the moment, but he's one of our main breed of males. Now he loves multis. He's very much a multi-eater, and you can see there he is at the back there, and he hasn't eaten probably for the best part of 10 weeks now, but he weighs about 1250 grams, and he's constantly wanted to breed with the girls. And sometimes you've just got to discipline yourself as an owner and say, hold him back, let him try to not tire himself out. Overbreeding can be a problem. So for him, he's got substantial weight on him. I'm not worried about him. And I know, because I've had him for more than 2 years, I know that he goes off and on, a bit like Ezra, that a breeder male will switch off and on, and for some reason they don't eat because they're so preoccupied in feeding that they are focused on feeding and they switch off their feeding instincts. And again, I wouldn't be overly concerned. Most of our breeder males now are back on food. So if I show you one that's just recently gone back on food, which is Joker, our clown boy. He took a multi. He refused a large prey item. There he is. But he did take a multi. And you can see, if you look at his body condition, weight, toning on his body, he's now starting to rebuild his body weight. And he's been such a wonderful animal for us this year. So there's an example of a male that is back on food. And the other one is Elvis. He's been a wonderful breeder. He took a small rat yesterday. Just look at his body condition, how beautiful and he is. And you wouldn't believe he's been put to about 3 or 4 girls. But he's about 1350 grams. And the sooner the males get back into condition, the sooner you can breed with them in the next season. So the key is to bring both the girls and the boys back into good condition. And the good news is every single girl that's given us eggs has now had their first meal. So I'll show you a couple. Venus gave us some eggs about 3 weeks ago. She took a small multi, she wouldn't take a small rat. So it's the size of the prey item that determines. So she'll start to pack on weight again. So she's gone back on food. The other one that's gone back on food is Jupiter, that gave us those 6 clown eggs. And there she is. Now she took a multi as well. So when the girls go back on food, sometimes it's good to give them small prey items and get their metabolism kicking in again, because they may have fasted for 3 months. And you don't want to give them too big a meal, in my opinion. Small is better than too large, and let them gently build up their feeding instincts again. And this is one issue that I'm not too worried about. Pringle, who's our calico. She hasn't eaten for about 3 months, but we believe that she could be giving us a clutch this year. And just like all the other females, nothing to worry about, because if she gives us a clutch, she'll give us the clutch and then she'll get back on food afterwards. So if you get a female that's either gravid or is carrying follicle growth, and the eggs are getting so big that They haven't got space to pass food through, so they switch off eating and they live off their reserves. So again, if you get any females that you've been locking to males and they're at the stage where they're 25 to 35 millimeter follicles, don't worry if they're not eating food. Give them smaller prey items like small multis to sustain them through that period, then they'll switch off when they're ready. The other one I'll show you is Ray. Let's have a quick look at Ray, Adam. I know the video is going to be finishing shortly, but Ray's going to give us a clutch soon. You can see she was moving in position to lay. Now she hasn't eaten for about 3 months. So another gravid girl that could go for us, and these are things not to worry about, because she'll be panning food as soon as she lays. She'll give us more food. So part 2, we'll go through some other feeding issues. I hope the first part was helpful. Please feel free to make any comments in the boxes if you have any health issues or any feeding issues affecting your snakes, and we'll do our very best to answer any questions you have. Thank you, Adam, and we shall see you next time.